Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those within the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights. I'm Sherry Stewart. This week we are drawing our attention to the National Day of Prayer, which will be recognized this Thursday, May 7th. While social distancing guidelines are in place, there are still ways that you can be involved in the National Day of Prayer. To kick off our conversation and tell you how is Mayor Matt Wallagora, Mayor of the City of Alpena. Later in the broadcast, we'll be joined by a local area pastor and a member of our armed services. Well, joining me first up to kick off the conversation is our Mayor of Alpena, the City of Alpena, Mayor Matt Wallagora. Thank you, sir, for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Sharon.
Or afternoon, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So the National Day of Prayer, we know that it's coming up this Thursday, May 7th, and that there will have to be some adjustments in terms of the recognitions that have been done in the past. What are we planning for the City of Alpena? And I know that that's going to be a loose format because of where we are with the social distancing, but what are your thoughts so far, sir?
So far, we will certainly recognize the National Day of Prayer as the first Thursday of May, as we always have, or at least since I've been here. I believe it was enacted back in the Reagan administration as a national holiday, and then recognized even previous to that. So the president will put out a proclamation, as he does every year. It usually comes out the day before or that morning sometimes. And I will, of course, for the city as well, to recognize that. The day will be significantly different, obviously, than what we're used to with usually start the day out with a breakfast with the service clubs at the Manuel Lutheran Church, and then at noon we all gather at the steps of City Hall. So this year we won't be doing either of those that I'm aware of with the social distancing, and so probably a significant amount of it will be somewhat of a virtual format, which we're still kind of working around with the group that organizes all of that. And so, what I can probably say at this point is that we will certainly recognize the day as National Day of Prayer, and at noon or thereabouts, we will do the proclamation and invite everyone to take part in that as well. Up until then, I would say for people to kind of watch social media and the news media, like yourself, and the paper and the radio for updates on if they would like to participate as a whole. But obviously, people are invited to recognize that privately as well.
And we know that the community looks forward to this every year, and it's we don't want to put a downer on it, but I'm sure people are disappointed that they won't be able to gather on the steps or on the lawn as years pass. What are your thoughts on that?
For sure, it's always been very well attended, and it's a very I think it's a significant day for all of us, and so to be able to do that publicly with our friends and coworkers, and usually the kids come down from All Saints and stuff. So it's really been a special day over the years, and so it'll be significantly different, but the message is still the same.
And what would be the message that you would like people to take away this year? Because there obviously are so many different challenges that people are facing. So what would be some of the messages or messaging that you would like to deliver to the city?
I was reviewing the proclamation. I usually review proclamations from years past, and it's like you said, it's significantly different this year. So it's really kind of I'm still kind of milling that over. The message will obviously be, that if you have a belief and you have faith, that this is obviously the time to reach out to that, and just ask for guidance and comfort in the families that are really struggling with this, and our first responders and people that obviously have to work around it daily. So really that's probably going to be the main message, and I think people probably expect that.
Mm-hmm. And I've been told that this area, this region, is one of resiliency. What are you most proud of when you look at to see how maybe your coworkers or your community is actually maneuvering this crisis? What are you most proud of when you look at them?
Probably the entire community. I think as a whole, we've really done very well. Certainly our first responders in our hospital and our leadership, we all meet virtually every Monday and as a region and discuss how things are going, what people need, what the facts are. And so from a mayor's standpoint, that's probably one of the bigger leadership type things that are going very well. Everyone attends the meeting. And then just as a community, just as what we see for supporting our local businesses as much as we can. And I'm sure that will be seen even more later once things start to reopen and we find out who is really struggling the most. Right now, there's such a detachment. We order food, we curbside from our, the restaurants that we want to support the most. And our businesses as well. There's some businesses downtown that now just recently have opened up for curbside. And so it's really good to see that the community supports those businesses and those people that are really struggling.
That's excellent. And this has caught so many by surprise, the duration of it and all of the layers. What are some of the learnings that you think your leadership will take away as we hopefully start reopening in phases? What are some of the important learnings that we can grasp hold to?
At this point, I think I can speak for most of the leadership here in Alpena that what we've learned is that we do work together very well. We communicate very well, and that goes for the city communicating with the township and the county and our law enforcement, our court system, our emergency services, health department. I think everybody is really communicating well. So really, if it comes to a learning experience, we've learned that we do communicate very well. Our region is probably unlike any other region in Michigan that we make sure that we all know what we need and what everybody is going through.
Very good, sir. Well, we are looking forward to your proclamation on May 7th. And we'll understand that we may have to make adjustments. Are you planning to deliver that? Would it be on one of the social media platforms, or how can people actually see that? How are you planning to deliver your message?
More than likely, it'll be on some platform, whether it's Facebook or Zoom or something, GoToMeeting, something like that. What I intend to do is, once I know the details of that, I will put that out on at least my social media, and I will also make sure that the media, as yourself and others, are aware of what we're doing, so you guys can put that out there. So it'll hopefully we can get the word out there and make sure that everybody knows that pretty much the same way we would have if we were going to do it live on the City Hall steps. We would make sure that people are aware of what they can do to participate.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we will definitely make sure that we update our social media platforms so that the community can be aware. We thank you so much. We appreciate your leadership, and we thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Sherry. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, sir.
Insights will return after these messages.
Well, welcome back to Insights. We are joined now by Pastor Marlon Smith with the Huron Shores Fellowship of Alpena. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so very much, Sherry.
And we're also joined by Staff Sergeant Clifford Prince of the United States Army. Welcome.
Hi, Sherry. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad that both of you are here to carry on this conversation about the National Day of Prayer. Sergeant Prince, I want to start with you, though. I know as we were setting up this interview, we were talking about the importance of this day for our servicemen and women. Tell me about that.
Well, yes, ma'am. I think, too, the National Day of Prayer in a sense, for a lot of service men and women around the world. Because as you know, right now there are people overseas in combat situations or a multitude of different situations of having to make big decisions that affect many people's lives. And having that National Day of Prayer to where we have a time, even if we're out in the field, where we can take a pause and just think about for a minute and actually pray, for guidance in these types of situations. Mm-hmm. And what it does help too, it does bring the group together. As somebody who has experienced in combat, believe me, when things get hairy, people want to pray. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we realize we need a strength bigger than ourselves, just to keep us going, to keep us resilient. And in the Army and across the armed forces right now, resiliency is a big priority, a big topic of how do we stay resilient. And that National Day of Prayer, that time, that window we have to remember to stop and pray, to look for guidance, but past ourselves, I think it brings us together, and it's extremely important.
That is certainly important. And Pastor Smith, for you and the congregation, as we maneuver this, and we know that we'll have to observe this day in a different fashion than years past, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are that no matter how we have to observe it, it is, like Sergeant Prince said, such an important day for us to refocus our priorities. And scripturally speaking, we are reminded that you don't have to read very far, especially in the Old Testament, where the problem times come when prosperity gets our focus off of God and onto ourselves. We're doing things fine. We don't really need any divine inspiration. When you hit the bottom, that's when your heart and your mind turns toward God just naturally. And we're kind of in a spot like that right now, where there's lots of questions, there's lots of uncertainty and insecurity. And that's when we just naturally have hearts and minds more opened up to conversation with God, which this National Day of Prayer affords us to have.
And you talked about those questions. I imagine that clergy from every different faith is receiving those questions. What type of questions are you receiving from your congregation or just people that you encounter in your day-to-day? What types of questions and concerns are they having?
Well, the overriding question is the why. Why would a loving God allow such a thing like this to happen to the entire globe? And that's really one that's of difficulty for any of us to answer. But the part that we can keep drawing people's minds back to is the fact that even with all the and I'm not downplaying the loss of life and the suffering and the isolation that's a part of this experience, but my word, with all of that going on, there's all sorts of positives to be gleaned from this experience as well. And we're hearing comments from families that they're more bonded now, they're tighter than they ever used to be. Granted, that they're being forced to be together physically in a lot of situations, but even if they're across country or in different, the electronic communication that they're having now is much elevated from what it normally had been, because they've got this common thing to kind of fight and talk about. So that's a real positive and a blessing that's come out of this so far that we hear from a lot of our constituents.
And Sergeant Prince, earlier you were talking about that this day allows your servicemen and women to come together to bond, if not for that moment in time. Tell me a little bit more about how you actually plan to recognize this day. Do you have a special program? What will the military do to be involved with this initiative?
Well, typically, we have our chaplains who will notify all the servicemen and women of the other opportunities that we have, and the ones that if we're separated, we reach out to our soldiers or our Marines or other branches, and they reach out to their people. And we have a big thing. We try to keep connected even if we're split up, and to make sure that we're staying focused and check on each other. And if they have any need, if it's spiritual, physical, things like that, where we have that time where, hey, hey, I'm here. Staff Sergeant Prince is here. I can pray with you if you need prayer, or whatever else it may be. And so the Army and the other armed forces always make it a point to, our chaplains do a really good job to reaching out and giving those and letting the other people know that the things that are available and that they're there for them. And they trickle that down to the chain of command to make sure that the leaders understand what's happening as well.
And what can you tell me about the morale right now in your branch of the service? What is the morale like for our servicemen and women?
Yes, the morale. I know you got the older group of us guys and ladies, and you have the younger group. You know, in the younger group, there's always a lot of questions. Like Pastor was saying, there's a lot of questions. The unknowns. You know, there's always the unknowns. Always bring that sense of could be anxiety or fear. You know, one thing about the armed forces is that we're trained to run towards danger, not run away from it. And so there's a lot of people wanting to get up and they want to help. They want to be involved some way or another to be able to help their fellow citizens. You know, to be a part of the solution instead of, you know, part of the problem. And so you see a lot of that feedback. And we do our best to help with the people that we have that might have some concerns with their family, you know, back at home if they're separated, or even if they're home now. You know, the questions, they try to just, you know, hey, we're here for you. You let us know anytime something happens. You know, I always tell them my phone's on all the time. Mm-hmm. If something happens when we're not, you know, in the group, you call me at any time. You know, where we can, you know, get things on the net as soon as possible if you have a concern or something else that comes up.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, we will take a quick break. We will be back more to continue on our conversation about the National Day of Prayer.
Insights will return after these messages.
Welcome back to Insights. We're continuing our conversation now with Pastor Marlon Smith and also Staff Sergeant Prince. And this question is for you, Pastor Smith. How can the congregation or our neighbors, how can we be involved this year? What are some of your recommendations to partake of this important day?
Well, we won't be able to be advertising it like we normally do in our bulletins and by word of mouth at church, but everybody knows that it's the first Thursday in May, and they've become accustomed to getting out and being a part of it. Now, we'll have to be waiting as far as how it's going to actually be played out this year, as far as how we can be a part of it and be participating. But before then, even outside of that particular day, we've got various ways that our church members are utilizing this power of prayer. For instance, we've got a group that go out and take care of our senior citizen members of our congregation by just, you know, extending that distance and going to their homes or their facilities and singing songs of praise and praying with them outside their windows from a deck, from a distance, just so they can maintain that relationship and fellowship. And always finish with a word of prayer. And to a person, that's what they appreciate the most, is being able to see their friends from church again, but then to be able to lift up all the concerns that we all have in prayer. And that'll just continue through as long as this isolation is, and especially on that Thursday.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to point out that this day is for everyone, regardless of faith. That's yes. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a well-worn tradition. I mean, it outdates any of us on this interview right here because it dates back to 1952. The mayor probably gave you some of the history of that.
It did.
In 1952, that the president is actually required to sign the proclamation to encourage all Americans to pray on that particular day. And what a blessing that is, to live in a country where it's not only safe and legal to pray ourselves at church or wherever we want, but that it's encouraged governmentally on that one day in particular to get together as a country and just raise up our adoration, our thanks, and our praise to God, and then our concerns for the country in general.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Staff Sergeant Prince, any thoughts on that?
I am in total agreement. You know, we are so blessed to have a nation where we have those freedoms. Mm-hmm. You know, all the way back to the very beginning, you know, when the founding was just happening, you know, after the Revolutionary War and all those things, when they were building those foundations, the leaders always asked for prayer. They, you know, asked the people to pray, that they made good decisions, that they could set up a system where people could have those rights, those freedoms, without the worry of it ever being taken away. Right. And it just blesses my heart so much to live in a country like that. I'm so proud of a country like that, you know, throughout the world where we can still resemble freedom and that nobody can take that from us. And then there's men and women out there willing to fight for that right. For somebody that they can, if they want to pray, they can pray. If they want to gather, they can gather. And to ask for guidance and ask for that support that we need to continue to walk a good and effective life here on this earth.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Prince, you talked about being a part of the military, that you're trained to run towards the danger and not from it. So I would presume that definitely prayer is definitely very important in your line, in your chosen career.
Yes, yeah. Prayer is, at least for me, it is extremely important, and it gives me that extra strength to where I can be there for others as well. Because and everybody has their own roles, and there are situations that come up sometimes where you're not sure exactly what might happen. And so having that extra underlying background of knowing, hey, I can hand things over to the Lord and let Him carry the weight is a huge benefit. And and when I'm separated from my families, or when all of us are separated from our families, that's a hard time. And where we can trust the Lord and pray that our families will be kept safe. And as throughout the state right now, and across the country, there's thousands of National Guard and people deployed right now helping with this crisis.
Right.
And and I'm sure there's a lot of those folks, shooting up a prayer here and there, for guidance, for discernment, and for protection. Then they can they want to be a help. They want to help their fellow Americans. We love our country. We love our people.
Absolutely. And Pastor Smith, to you, as we move even beyond the day of prayer, how important is that? And should it be in our daily lives? What are your recommendations as we maneuver this whole COVID-19 pandemic? The National Day of Prayer is obviously a phenomenal event that we have coming up. But beyond that, what are your recommendations to our community?
Well, beyond that, it's just a matter of retaining that priority and encouraging one another to not only pray to God for guidance for ourselves and asking for His care for us individually, but asking for His help so that and I think this is one of the greatest things that's come out of this situation from what I can see so far. How can we take better care of each other? How can we be more understanding, more sympathetic for those around us that, let's face it, up until now, a lot of us haven't gotten to know our neighbors as well as we should have, or even connected with our family members as well as we should have. This has reminded us that really is important. That should be a high, high priority.
And then before I close, Pastor, is there anything specifically that your church is doing? Are you doing anything? I know you earlier on mentioned that our faith base are really having to use the technology to stay connected. Is there anything that you're doing that you want to mention for your congregation or the community at large, how you guys will be involved in this National Day of Prayer this year?
Well, our lead pastor, Warren Hoffman, did mention that at the beginning here, everybody that's a preacher this year has been turned into a televangelist. So we've got, just like all the other churches almost, that have been forced into putting everything online. So there's all sorts, and maybe this is just a great reminder for everybody that there are resources, endless resources for whatever kind of worship service, whatever kind of worship music, prayers, inspiration you want. It's there. There's no shortage of that kind of information. So we're a part of that. We're streaming our services on Sundays and Wednesday night Bible studies as well. And your station also featured we're located on M32. So we've got a lot of visibility traffic going by. And your station actually featured a new sign that we put out in front that one of our parishioners and her father painted, that just has do you notice, remember it?
Yeah, I do.
His eye is on the sparrow, and it faces directions, just to remind us that He cares about us as much as He does everything in His creation, and it's just a good reminder. So that is a marquee, our streaming services and Bible studies. And then if I could just wiggle one little thought in here, I think it's helped us, like the sergeant mentioned, to remember that we're a part of a country that started this way. And I would just encourage folks, if they ever get to Washington, D.C., all you have to do is go to any of the monuments, the Lincoln, the Jefferson Memorial, any of the memorials or monuments. You look around, take a few minutes to look around. They were deep men of faith that put together our country in the early days. And you don't hear about the quotes. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Jefferson Memorial. The ceiling inside is full of scripture and quotes of how devoted he was and all of the founding fathers to the same God that we serve today as they did back then. And so I think that speaks to the heritage of our country.
And on that note, I think that's a good note to end on. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today to talk about this important day that we have coming up this Thursday. Pastor Marlon Smith, again, with Huron Shores Fellowship. And to you, sir, Staff Sergeant Clifford Prince, I want to thank you. Thank you for your service to our country, sir. And again, we just thank you for joining us. We look forward to the National Day of Prayer, and we're believing that everyone will enjoy that time to lift up prayers for our country. Well, that wraps up this week's Insights. Thank you for watching. I'm Sherry Stewart. If you have a question, comment, or story idea, you can reach us at news@wbkb11.com.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.